we look at the effects on ordinary people of the worst tensions in years on the border between India and Pakistan. Recently, cross-border firing has claimed the lives of more than 20 civilians from both countries who've already fought 4 wars. A France 24 team met the family of one of those civilians as they investigated the living conditions of people in the Kashmir border area and what's being done to build bridges.
This densely populated border area of Pakistan lies on the edge of the Indian part of Kashmir. In recent days, cross-border firing has claimed over 20 civilian lives on both sides. Tensions continue to remain high in Chaprar Bala, a village located less than a mile from the invisible line of control that divides these two nations. Asif Rahman, a 54-year-old man, was a victim of Indian mortar firing in the middle of the night. It killed him on the spot.
The mortar came from that side and it struck right here. My grandfather was about to step outside when he got hit by shrapnel. Behind me was an old bed, which was also destroyed by the blast. He fell on it and spent the whole night agonizing.
The family had moved to Sialkot, the nearest city, for safety, but Asif Rahman had refused to accompany them. Following Rahman's death that fateful night, this is the first time the family is getting together.
He would joke, calling them firecrackers. I would argue, saying, "No, father, can't you see? Those are mortar rounds." But he didn't take me seriously. He told me to leave and that he would stay here. Why is it us, the little people, who are being punished for a fight between soldiers? If they want to fight, they should kill each other, not us.
Journalists like Shams Javed have been reporting on this latest spate of violence from the front line. Javed believes that these villages are collateral damage in this broader conflict.
Beyond those fields is a very sensitive area. That's the borderline, behind which is Indian territory and the checkpoints from where the mortars are being fired. It's about 500 to 600 meters from this village where we're standing, and it's here where the rounds end up falling.
Both sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire agreement that came into effect in 2003. 50 kilometers from where Asif lost his life, many Indian Kashmiris had to hastily abandon their homes. They now live in this temporary shelter, a school converted into a refugee camp guarded by Indian soldiers. Over 30,000 residents live in such camps, waiting for peace so that they can go back to their homes.
As you can see, we all live in this one room. How can so many families live in the same room? It's very hard for us to be forced to live here.
The Indian government is providing them with food and shelter. The villagers, unfortunately caught in the conflict, have tried to come together in this tragedy. They find comfort in each other's company.
We left all our belongings, our livestock, our farms and properties to take refuge here. Now we all cook together and we eat together like one family.
The Kashmir issue has poisoned relations between India and Pakistan ever since the countries first became independent in 1947. Both claim their right over the territory. While Indians are accused of human rights violation in the part they govern, Pakistan continues to patronize such jihadi outfits in response to Indian occupation of the region, a policy that has brought both nuclear-armed countries to the brink of war in the past. In this latest round of hostilities, thousands of Islamists in Pakistan have called for jihad against India in public rallies. Despite this conflict, there is a growing minority in both countries who want to build bridges between India and Pakistan. An example of this rapprochement, these future engineers in Islamabad who have started what they call a virtual dinner with Indian students over Skype.
Yeah, so now we are connected to the Indian side, and we've got Adiba Rao and we've got Pushkal Dev.
As these youngsters eat, they get to know each other better in a bid to overcome misconceptions through person-to-person contact.
We don't buy into the traditional rivalry. We don't see why it keeps happening. I think it's because of the history, but there is no, animosity between the masses.
I just never imagined it to be a happy place or a normal place, just like India.
But with border tensions at their worst the last decade, even if the next generation wants to grow closer, Leaders of Pakistan and India have adopted a hardline posture towards each other, stifling any hope for peace between the two countries.
Now, for more on this, I'm now joined from Washington by Frédéric Gnard, who's with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He's the director of its South Asia program. Hello, thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning.
Now, our reporter Taha Siddiqui ends his report by saying that border tensions are at their worst in the last decade. How did it come to this?
Well, I think that we are, for the first time in a long time, in a very particular situation where what we are seeing is not necessary to what we are seeing is the struggle of two domestic logic. The bilateral aspect of what we see today is in effect very limited. On the Pakistani side, we have a struggle between the civilian and the military for the overall control of Pakistan's foreign policy and the policy over India in particular, with the Pakistani civilian government willing to make some compromise and willing to go part of the way in order to get better economic relations with India, and a military which is willing to go also part of the way, but definitely not as far, and definitely also wants to keep the issue open. On the Indian side, because of the situation in Pakistan, we do have an Indian government which is unable to define a policy because there is no coherence on the one side, so it's almost impossible to identify the minimal concession point on the other side. And because of that, can only do two things, either facilitate the dialogue or punish Pakistan. And has decided after the beginning of the incidents to punish Pakistan and capitalize politically on it. And this is where we are right now. I mean, we are facing new elections in Jammu and Kashmir on the one side, and therefore the Indian government has every interest to show that it's strong and determined in front of Pakistan. And the Pakistani side, a Kashmir issue which is very much in line with everything we've seen in Pakistan recently, including the political crises and so on and so forth. So that's why I say there are two domestic logic fighting each other rather than truly a bilateral issue there.
Are you suggesting then that it doesn't really matter who's in power? I mean, India has had a new prime minister for about 6 months now, Narendra Modi, and he invited his Pakistani counterpart to his inauguration. Is that not regarded as some sort of improvement or a positive sign?
Well, I mean, improvements or degradation are never linear. I mean, what Narendra Modi was trying to signify is that he was ready for improvement, but he was basically on the Pakistani side to decide what he was up to and decide what he would make with this opening. Since things have restarted, then it was also very clear at the time of the inauguration that the Indian response would be harsh. How harsh will it get? We don't know. I mean, there is no reason to believe really that this will lead to any sort of escalation. There is simply the willingness to demonstrate that the Indian government will not compromise when provoked.
What about the fact that the two countries cooperated when there were floods in Kashmir? Does that not prove that they can move forward together on certain issues?
This is politics. Both countries have an interest to show that they are not the one who are negating any possibility of peace. And yes, they can cooperate on a number of issues. I mean, this is not the only instance in which they did cooperate in the past. And if you remember, there is also this agreement between the two, the Indus Water Treaty, which is a mechanism for solving dispute over the share of water between the two countries, which has survived despite the conflict which has existed between the two countries. So this is not in contradiction with what we are seeing right now.
I understand that you've lived in both countries, in both India and Pakistan. Is it fair to say, I mean, did you think that there was one country where perhaps the will is stronger for better ties?
I think that, well, yes and no. I mean, the main concern on the Indian side is to, in a way, ignore Pakistan as much as they can. I mean, Modi arrived in power with an economic agenda which was by and large also the economic agenda of his predecessor. But he is less perhaps willing than his predecessor to compromise a number of issues. Manmohan Singh was definitely willing to be the one who made peace with Pakistan. On Pakistan, you also have a number of people ready to compromise and willing to do part of the way in order to get in better terms with things. And the actual constituency for Kashmir is probably more limited in Pakistan than we usually think it is. I mean, you do have pockets where this is strong, and this is usually linked to the presence of Pakistani refugees and where the concern over Kashmir is really serious. But by and large, even if there is some sympathy in the population for the cause, well, this is not a major concern of theirs.
What do you make about international efforts to bring India and Pakistan closer together? Is there enough being done?
What international efforts? I mean, you have to realize also that the internationalization of the conflict itself is a stake in the conflict. Pakistan has always trying to internationalize as much as possible, knowing full well that it cannot get what it wants alone. India, on the other side, has refused the internationalization of the conflict after having been the first country under Nehru to introduce the issue to the new United Nations and seen that the resolution was perhaps going against its own will. So the internationalization itself is very much part of the political struggle between the two countries.
Frédéric Grard, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Washington for our Focus segment today.
My pleasure.
That's it from me for now. We'll be back with a full news roundup for you in just a few minutes' time. Don't go away.